In a quiet Paris cafe, an American took one sip of espresso and immediately began correcting the barista on how French coffee should taste. The barista stared with the same expression people use when reading a one-star review titled, "Authenticity is rude." He replied, "Monsieur, this is Paris, not Starbucks," like he was clarifying a global misunderstanding. The American insisted he knew international coffee standards, citing blogs nobody respected. Customers began watching like they were witnessing a low-budget reality show. The barista wiped the counter slowly, realizing he was arguing with a man who believes Paris should taste like Florida malls. By the end, even the espresso machine hissed louder, not in steam, but disappointment. On a German platform, an American lectured a conductor about how trains should run like New York. The conductor's silence was so sharp, it could have derailed a train. He finally said, "Sir, our delays are minutes, not mysteries," with surgical German accuracy. The American doubled down, mentioning flexibility, a concept Germany rejected centuries ago. Nearby passengers lifted their eyebrows in synchronized disbelief. Even the digital timetable glitched for a moment, possibly out of embarrassment. The train departed precisely on time, leaving the American arguing with air that didn't care. In a crowded Paris metro, an American loudly started teaching locals proper metro etiquette, as if France had been waiting for his masterclass. He demonstrated standing angles, told strangers where to put their bags, and even tried correcting a musician on station acoustics. Parisians stared at him like he was a live bug in their baguette. One woman muttered, "Monsieur, we've done this since Napoleon," with the sigh heavy enough to power the entire train. But the American continued, confident his wisdom was revolutionizing public transport. Even the metro announcement paused, as if the speaker system refused to participate in this circus. When the doors finally closed on his mid-sentence lecture, the entire carriage silently celebrated the universe's timing. In Rome, an American told the chef his carbonara needed more cream, like he was explaining gravity to Einstein. The chef froze, clutching his pan as if the words had physically slapped him. He whispered, "Cream in carbonara?" as if reading a prophecy of doom. The American nodded proudly, unaware he had committed culinary treason. The entire kitchen staff stopped breathing for 2 seconds. A tourist nearby pretended not to listen but silently prayed for global peace. The chef finally served the dish anyway, not out of kindness, but because arguing with this man was emotionally expensive. In Prague's Old Town Square, an American confidently explained that the medieval buildings needed a modern refresh. The tour guide froze, as if someone suggested repainting the Sistine Chapel with glow-in-the-dark paint. He calmly replied, "These buildings survived wars. They will not survive your ideas." But the American pointed to Gothic towers, recommending LED strips, sleeker walls, and minimalistic vibes. Tourists gathered, unsure if this was historical commentary or a cultural meltdown. A pigeon landed on a statue, stared at him, then flew away because even the wildlife refused association. The guide simply continued the tour, choosing silence over another century of trauma. In snowy Oslo, an American insisted Norwegians were wrong about cold weather. Locals stared at him like he was challenging physics itself. One man replied, "We are born in cold. You look like you're meeting it for the first time." But the American continued, explaining proper winter logic while visibly shivering. A woman walked by in a t-shirt just to prove a national point. His breath froze mid-sentence, the universe muting him directly. Even the snowflakes seemed to land harder near him, out of disrespect. In a peaceful London queue, an American offered better queue strategies like he was CEO of standing in line. The Brits stared at him with expressions that could file noise complaints. One elderly man finally said, "We've queued since before your country existed," with royal level calm. The American attempted explaining efficiency, a doomed mission from the start. A mother whispered to her child, "Just ignore him, love. It's not contagious." Even the bus arrived early just to escape the conversation. By the time the American reached the front, the queue's respect for him was at absolute zero. At a Dutch museum, an American lectured a guide about modern ways to display art, complete with TED Talk hand motions. The guide nodded, politely, the universal face of someone moderating a live spam discussion. He gently said, "Sir, these paintings are centuries older than your country." With museum-level professionalism, the Americans still pushed for better lighting angles. Visitors nearby turned slowly, confused if this was performance art. A toddler stared at him like he was a misbehaving exhibit. Even the security cameras paused, unsure whether to record or cry. A Danish cashier scanned items calmly, while an American explained how the store layout was hurting customer flow. The cashier responded with Nordic silence so heavy it could have frozen the Wi-Fi. Finally, he said, "It works for us," without blinking once. The American added diagrams in the air like a rejected architect. A woman in line stared at him like he was a human traffic jam. Even the barcode scanner beeps lower, exhausted by the conversation. The cashier bagged everything neatly, including the American's confidence. In a Madrid taxi, an American corrected the driver's route using an app he installed 14 minutes earlier. The driver replied, "Señor, Google Maps learns from me," with divine Spanish authority. But the American continued, tracing imaginary roads in midair. The driver didn't argue. He made one turn that instantly proved him wrong. A couple walking by even looked inside the taxi, sensing the cringe. The American sank into his seat like a defeated gladiator. When they arrived, the driver said, "Next time, trust people, not your phone." And the meter beeped in applause. At Zurich Airport, an American lectured a Swiss officer about faster checkpoint systems. The officer stamped his passport with moderator energy, approving nonsense just to move on. He calmly said, "Our airport is ranked #1 in Europe." The American blinked, suddenly remembering he had never been ranked #1 in anything. A nearby family tried not to laugh but failed spectacularly. The conveyor belt paused, almost offended. Even his suitcase looked away in embarrassment. In a Lisbon bakery, an American told the baker his pastries were too flaky. The baker froze, holding a pastel de nata like a fragile national treasure under attack. He repeated, "Too flaky?" as if translating an insult from Martian dialect. The American recommended more structure. A teenager behind him whispered, "Bro, it's a pastry." The baker let out a sigh heavy enough to power the city grid. He boxed a pastry anyway because arguing would require a license he didn't have. In Warsaw, an American complained Polish street names were too complicated and suggested simpler branding. The local nodded politely, the same way moderators nod before deleting spam. He said, "Our streets are older than your constitution," and everyone nearby inhaled sharply. The American blinked like a buffering YouTube ad. A cyclist passing by muttered something that translated to, "Please go home." Even the street signs seemed taller out of pride, and the cobblestones under him felt like they were quietly walking away. At a Swiss restaurant, an American took one sip of tap water and announced it tastes unfiltered, like he was Gordon Ramsay of hydration. The waiter blinked slowly, processing the fact that someone insulted the cleanest water on earth. He replied, "Sir, this water is cleaner than your passport photo," with alpine precision. The American insisted he knew water because he drank bottled brands at home, which only deepened the silence. A couple at the next table exchanged looks that said, "Is this man serious or is this performance art?" Even the glass reflected his face back in judgment. The waiter finally walked away, carrying both plates and the man's credibility. In Amsterdam, an American stood at the edge of a bike lane giving Dutch cyclists proper safety advice. He waved his arms, told people to ride slower, and nearly got flattened twice. Cyclists glared at him like he was trying to teach fish how to swim. One cyclist shouted, "We were born with bikes. What were you born with?" But the American kept going, explaining helmet physics and optimal lane discipline. Someone rang their bell in a tone that translated to, "Please go home." Even the bike lane arrows seemed to point away from him intentionally. Inside a German train's quiet car, an American decided the rules were too strict and kept talking loudly on his phone. Passengers turned their heads in synchronized disappointment, a silent national superpower. One man whispered, "Sir, this is the quiet car," with the precision of a legal warning. The American defended himself with freedom of speech, a concept the train carriage rejected instantly. A toddler glared at him from across the aisle, and somehow the toddler won. The attendant approached slowly, radiating ancient German authority. When the phone was finally put away, the entire car exhaled like peace had been restored. At a cozy Italian restaurant, an American explained to the waiter how tipping works, as if Italy needed economic mentorship. The waiter smiled with the elegance of someone silently disowning a customer. He replied, "We invented hospitality," in a tone that deserved an award. But the American insisted, lecturing him on percentages and proper service motivation. Diners began whispering like they were watching a live cultural car crash. The chef peeked out from the kitchen with a face that said, "Please let this be a nightmare." By the end, the waiter accepted the tip, not for service, but for emotional damage. On the London Tube, an American loudly reviewed the entire system like he was filming a sponsored rant. He complained about tunnels, colors, doors, and even gravity. A man beside him said, "Who exactly are you talking to?" But the American continued, offering tube redesign ideas like he owned all underground infrastructure. A group of teens recorded him, convinced they discovered a rare comedy creature. The train hissed so loudly it felt personal. Even the "Mind the gap" announcement sounded more tired than usual. In a Spanish plaza, an American shouted that locals were too loud, ironically being the loudest entity in a 5-mile radius. People paused, confused by the physics of his complaint. A woman calmly said, "Señor, the only loud thing here is you." But he kept ranting about noise pollution, practically creating a new pollution category himself. A street musician increased his guitar volume purely out of petty revenge. Even the pigeons evacuated the area, seeking quieter neighborhoods. Locals toasted to his departure before he even left. At the Acropolis, an American corrected a Greek historian on ancient Greek history. The historian blinked slowly, summoning patience from the gods. He responded, "My family has taught this for 400 years," with mythological calm. The American insisted, citing a 3-minute YouTube video as his source. Tourists gasped, sensing Zeus might intervene. The historian simply walked away, not defeated, but spiritually exhausted. Even the marble columns seemed to lean slightly away from the conversation. Because some Americans don't visit other countries to learn. They visit to give feedback, and the world keeps hitting ignore.